Well, the West Virginia Mountaineers pick up yet another big victory here late Tuesday night as the Mountaineers beat Texas Tech 82-71. They weren't fully staffed. They weren't really even at their best all the way through, but nonetheless, the Mountaineers get an impressive victory despite everything that's been going on with the program. This one over Texas Tech, so their second win over the Red Raiders, and this one they didn't need a game-winning buzzer beater to beat Texas Tech. They got a sound victory over Texas Tech. Again, 82-71, the score. The Mountaineers now 14-5 on the year. This is a WVU Hoops edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So bringing you a WV Sports Now edition here on the hardwood of the program. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I will be joined alongside by Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. And Alan, West Virginia wins this game. They win this game by double digits. They get a convincing win. They controlled it most of the way through. But Sherman, who had 25 against Kansas, didn't play in this game. McBride, who has been a player that I've been calling for and did a past show on, getting national recognition, and he's been getting it. He's been an MVP of this team. But it's been a roller coaster ride recently. He was sluggish in that first half. He then picked it up later. McNeil, though, steps up and becomes their leading scorer, and I don't think anyone who thought McNeil would be the leading scorer in this game. Culver deals with foul trouble, but yet the Mountaineers get a victory. So what does that say about this program right now, especially off of a victory over Kansas that also was in double digits?
Yeah, I'm really impressed by the way West Virginia plays night in, night out, and they have such a deep team that they can overcome McBride played most of the first half in foul trouble. Culver played most of the second half in foul trouble. Taz Sherman didn't play at all, and They hardly missed a beat. I mean, this is a really good team in Texas Tech, and they just kind of I mean, it was a close game all the way through, but it was not like they played above themselves to get this win. They just kind of went out there and did what they always do. They played good defense. I thought there were you pointed out some specific individual contributions, like McNeil. Obviously, his first half shooting really kept them in it when McBride was on the bench. I thought they were very good at the free throw line. 74%. They're not always a great foul shooting team. They're pretty good there. I don't. There's nothing to complain about from this West Virginia performance. They beat a really good team on the road. They swept a really good team. They did it without a bunch of their key contributors being able to be their key contributors for various reasons. And I mean, this is the kind of win that gets you moved up a seed, and that's exactly what West Virginia needs to be looking for right now.
Well, and they were talking about the entire broadcast and how Joe Lunardi said before this game that the winner of this game would be a 3 seed for him, which is a major jump from where West Virginia was projected to be even 3 weeks ago. And especially the sluggish way they started 2021 with the controversy and losing a superstar and then losing a couple games. They weren't really at their best. But after win over Kansas, after this victory, and doing it the way they did, that it's impressive because, again, they weren't deep. They weren't even at their best. They didn't have their best player at his best. And yet you're going to leave this game with Bob Huggins not having to have a come to Jesus meeting. We've been delayed on some of these post-game shows recently because Huggins has been talking to his team for 20 minutes before he even fires up the Zoom. So I imagine that's not happening. He's going to allow this team to get some sleep and get that taken care of and get back, home for that game over the weekend. And I think that's the trick. Now, the question is, can the Mountaineers keep this up, though? Can they beat quality opponents when McBride is faltering? Because he's certainly been less the second half of the year than he was the first half of the year with Culver in foul trouble. And the only ding that continuously is a ding for this team this year, not as much from the bench as you get from the starting lineup. No matter how they configure the starting 5, they get production there. Against Kansas, they had 4 men with 10-plus points. They get a little bit more tonight, but still, the bench, you would figure, needs to give you more to go far into a tournament.
Well, I mean, I think Bridges, he kind of is the bench, right? I mean, he's in the starting lineup, but he's not really supposed to be, I guess, or no one really expected him to be. And so he's kind of, he's in the starting lineup, but that's the guy that I think if you're looking at to be maybe a fourth or fifth scoring option, Evan Matthews didn't have a great shooting night tonight. He was 1 for 6. Bridges came up, hit a really big 3 in the second half, made all his free throws, got 6 rebounds. I mean, that's when you're getting those kind of contributions from guys that maybe you don't really have high expectations for. That's when, things are really going well. And you asked about, I think this is a good measuring stick game when you're talking about being able to play against a team that is really has talented players. I mean, McClung is one of the best guards in the conference, and he scored 30 against them last time. They held him to 17 tonight. I really thought they did a really good job on him. They had him frustrated, taking unnecessary fouls at the end of the game as he fouls out. And probably some of that's towards the stripes. I felt like it was an over-officiated game. It wasn't particularly physical, and there were 29 to 20 fouls, so almost 50 fouls in the game. I didn't feel like that was deserved. It broke up the flow of the game. That probably helps West Virginia more than it hurts them, even though they're usually the ones that cry foul, to turn a phrase there. Okay. But I think it disrupts a team like Texas Tech just as much, if not more. It clearly got in the head of McClung tonight, and they were in West Virginia was able to better deal with, and Texas Tech had foul trouble too. Santos Silva was in foul trouble the whole second half,
right? And
then McClung fouled out. But I thought West Virginia was better at dealing with its players not being in the game. When Culver wasn't in the game, when McBride wasn't in the game, I thought West Virginia did a better job of playing at a high level, even when they were missing guys.
Is there something that Texas Tech did in the first half they did not do in the second half, dealing with McBride? Because McBride's coming off 31 points against Kansas, but prior to that, he had a few games in a row where he was not able to really dominate scoring. He ends up with 20 in this game, which overall looks great, but certainly had that slow start in that first half where if it wasn't for McNeil, especially taking the reins with Sherman out, who knows where this Mountaineer team would have been, kind of McNeil coming out of nowhere and providing that scoring. What changed from the first to the second half, or did McBride just get hot? Because we've seen that at times this year.
Well, he was in the game. He only played 5 minutes in the first half. He got those 2 quick fouls early, and then Bob Huggins put him on the bench. And when he put him on the bench, the rest of the team played really well. So it didn't get to a place where Bob Huggins felt like he needed to put a guy with 2 fouls back in the game. McBride sat down, and McNeil was shooting well. Bridges was playing well. They were getting some pretty good minutes from Matthews and McCabe, even if they weren't scoring necessarily. And so there wasn't some kind of panic where Bob Huggins had to put a guy with 2 fouls back into the game. The team was playing well, and he waited. And McBride only played those 5 minutes in the first half. Then he gets into the game, and he does what he normally does in the second half. And so I don't think Texas Tech did anything to him other than get him in foul trouble, which is a thing that you can do. But and I think that's a concern for McBride. I mean, he can't be putting himself in that position because there are probably going to be games where those guys, McNeil's not going to score 15 points in a half very often. Right. Like that's not going to happen all the time. There will be times where if he only plays 5 minutes in the first half, that's going to really hurt the team. But tonight it didn't happen.
And you could argue that Texas Tech was not really at their best, because even though this was close at times, this certainly was a game that was controlled by the Mountaineers. And you had really the fourth best player in terms of somebody you think would score maybe even worse, end up as the leading scorer in this game. So not the greatest day for Texas Tech. The Mountaineers do get an 82-71 victory over the Red Raiders to sweep the season series. Alan Saunders, Mike Asti here for the WVU Hoops edition here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, WV Sports Now. Head over to WV Sports Now for any of that post-game coverage over there and our post-game recap for this game. Now, Alan, we talked about foul trouble with McBride, and he does play himself out of it, and he's just such a hot shooter. He ends up 6 for 12 for the 20 points in this game, that he can really catch fire at different times, and he can make up for struggling earlier in games. But Culver is not necessarily that guy, and he does take a presence away for this team, especially losing Oscar when he is in foul trouble. He was gone for, it felt like forever, but literally almost 10 consecutive minutes due to foul trouble in critical parts of the second half. Texas Tech did not come back, but I'd imagine a tournament team or a team that is a better team than Texas Tech probably would have come back. Maybe even the Red Raiders, if they were on their A game, could have come back. Is foul trouble a problem for this WVU team? And is there an issue with Culver? Because we talked about this on past shows with different players who are similar for their teams. I don't know what can be done, especially now. They need Culver to be a physical player, but he is just seemingly in foul trouble every game way too early.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become a more important thing since Oscar transferred. You know, they don't really have another guy that can score from that position like Culver can. They don't really have another guy that can rebound. I thought Bridges was really good tonight on the glass, but they don't really have another consistent rebounder like Culver is. And there are going to be games when the matchup dictates that they're going to need him. I didn't feel like Texas Tech is one of those teams. I feel like their best players are on the outside, and McClung and Shannon and Edwards, you know, and so I didn't feel like Texas Tech was a team that demanded Culver be in the game for 40 minutes, but those are going to come up, right? There are going to be teams with giant bigs that are going to be that are going to need a Culver in the game. And so, yeah, it's a concern. It's a lack of depth at that spot for sure. But, you know, I don't think there's very many perfect basketball teams out there right now. I think West Virginia is doing as good a job as anybody of playing through its issues. And yeah, that's probably one of them. But I don't think it's one that they, you kind of look across the way and you're like, well, all right, oh, that's our issue, but what do they got going on? Well, at least we don't have to deal with that. You know, there's a lot outside of maybe Baylor. There isn't a team that they're going to face that feels much better about the way they're playing right now.
And also, I hate saying this.
Of course, Baylor's not playing right now, so nobody playing right now is about the way they're playing right now, since Baylor isn't playing.
That's true, and it also we'll get there because Baylor not playing right now makes WVU feel a little better about themselves too, because they have that gauntlet turns into really only one more quality game and then a little bit of a break. Granted, they are apparently going to make up those games against Baylor, but I'd imagine not stacking them back to back with a day break there, because that was going to be rough. Who knows? Maybe they'll play twice in one day. But yeah, Baylor currently. Yeah, Baylor currently not playing, so the Mountaineers certainly feel like the best team out of the Big 12 right now. And honestly, and you don't know this, every given night is different. But Alan, you watch this game, you almost feel like Texas Tech is overrated at number 7 in the country, because the Mountaineers, undermanned, seemingly felt like the better team all the way through, and they beat them earlier in the year. Granted, that was off a game-winning shot at the end. But who knows what would happen if they play again tomorrow. The Mountaineers do get this victory now, 14-5 on the year, and I'd imagine now potentially crawling back into the top 10, maybe 10th at the worst. They were there before. They've crawled their way back now, including breaks because of COVID and an up and down schedule and a roller coaster ride, but they seem now to be hitting their stride. And I also think this is a testament to Bob Huggins, Alan. He is a Hall of Fame coach. He's flirting with 900 wins. He's not far from Bobby Knight, which was just outstanding to see that put up there during this broadcast. That's just an eye-catching thing. He's done everything you could imagine as a head coach except for win a national title with multiple Final Fours, etc. But this really feels like one of his better coaching jobs ever. I mean, in terms of evaluating Huggins, you've watched a lot of basketball. I know that that's incredible to say, but he's had to reroute this lineup and this team multiple times this year, completely change the complexion of everything. And before you answer, I will tell you, John Antonic, who was with the WVU athletic department, been with them a long time, is an historian of WVU athletics. He thinks that. And that's crazy to say, but that might be where you are with Huggins and what, depending on how this team finishes in Huggins' coaching performance this year.
Sure. And I mean, I played for a national championship with Cincinnati.
Right.
So you kind of have to take.
Got close with WVU. I get it.
I think the most impressive thing to me about Bob Huggins has been, and I hope he doesn't take this personally. He's an older guy, right? He's not young to this game. The flexibility that he continually shows. It's so easy for people that have been doing something for so long to get set in their ways. And I've never seen that from Bob Huggins ever. Yeah. He takes whatever he has and he figures out the best way to apply it to win that game that day. And then if he has to change it the next week, he changes it the next week, and he's fine with that. And when you've been around as long as he have and you've seen as much as he has, he knows all the ways there are to win. It's just a matter of getting the guys to execute and picking the right strategy for the right moment. And I feel like that last thing is the thing he's doing really, really well right now, is that it seems like he is really keyed in to exactly what this team has and what this team needs. And every move he's making is working. And I think it's been a really good job. Look, he might catch Roy Williams and wins this year. He's only 3 behind now, I think.
Alan, I don't see him slowing down. He might end up with the wins record overall.
Well, Roy Williams is not having a good year either.
Right.
So
right.
Kind of strange to say that, but I just think that that's maybe the most impressive thing about what Bob Huggins has done is just, this is a very different team than last year's team. It's a very different team than the team that they had in November and December, but they're still finding ways to win. They're doing it while employing some of those principles that flow throughout. They still play tough defense. They still rebound really well, but he's getting really good performances on offense from, frankly, pretty unheralded guys that did not come into this season with high expectations. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more you want from that in a coach, and I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it needs to happen sooner than later, and maybe this will be the team that gets him there.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it needs to happen, and it's inevitable to happen, but it's overdue to happen. And he also is the only coach in that top 10 wins list that does not come from, or at least at one point, coaching a thoroughbred number one recruiting class every other year type of program. Huggins is doing it with guys that you wouldn't expect to see at Duke, North Carolina, etc. And he's getting the most out of his guys. So this is one of his better performances for sure. This is a completely different team than where they were 3 months ago. And he's had to change this lineup and change this team even from where they were 3 weeks ago. Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Mike Asti here. WVU winning 82-71. Now 14-5 on the year after a big win over Texas Tech. They got Oklahoma coming up, and then it was going to be back-to-back versus Baylor. So we still don't know when those games are going to happen. Texas then finds themselves after that. So the schedule does not really get easier for West Virginia, Alan. You've seen what this team has done recently, and this certainly comes off of a little bit of a down 2021. That includes a loss to an unranked Florida team. The Mountaineers weren't playing that well, but now, and even struggling to Kansas State in some of those, now they get these back-to-back quality wins. You mentioned doing it with unknown guys as leading scorers. Get this, McNeil, the leading scorer in this game, Sherman, the leading scorer against Kansas. If somebody would have told you last week West Virginia's leading scorers are going to be Sherman and McNeil, I'm sure you would have said they're going to lose those 2 games, or certainly not win both of them by double digits in scoring. And that's the case. So what is the potential of this Mountaineer team, especially with a projection right now as a 3 seed, the schedule in front of them, and how they're playing right now in arguably the best conference in the country?
To me, I think the projection for West Virginia is really similar to a lot of other teams. If I look at, the top 25 teams, I could say the same thing I'm about to say about West Virginia with pretty much all of them. And they have enough talent to go really, really far in the tournament. They could be a Final Four team. They could also lose their first game.
Right.
The hardest thing for any team to have this year has been consistency. Outside of Gonzaga, Baylor, maybe Michigan and Villanova, nobody's had it.
Yeah, West Virginia's not had it. If they keep
nobody's had it. West Virginia hasn't had it, but nobody else has either.
Right.
Texas Tech hasn't had it. Virginia hasn't had it. Ohio State hasn't had it. Alabama hasn't had it. There's nobody. There's none of those teams that I would rather be than West Virginia. It just will be a matter of when we get to March, who finds the most consistency and who's able to apply it on at the right moments. And I hate to say that, a lot of this, what's going to happen between now and then, this is a really big win for West Virginia. I think this is going to get them back in the top 10. I think this moves them up a line in the seeding, probably. You can throw all that away with 2 straight losses, which totally could happen. but I don't see my feeling about this team changing between now and the tournament. I still think they're a team that could go to the Final Four unless they get somebody injured or something significant happens. I'll think they're a team that could go to the Final Four, and they'll also be a team that could lose to Bradley on the first night. It all depends on the consistency and the consistency of execution. And that's been really hard to find for everybody in college basketball this year.
And the Mountaineers have shown that they haven't been consistent. They've lost games they otherwise shouldn't have lost. They've won big games, but they usually win big games throughout a year. And then there have been years where they've gone deep in the tournament. And there's been other years where they lost early on. It depends on how you're playing really towards the end of the season. At least the Mountaineers right now are peaking. But they have Oklahoma coming up. That's going to be a difficult game. And then this schedule is still very much in flux moving forward. Still hard games coming up. It is why you want to have as great of a seed as you possibly could have, which is why the Mountaineers stacking these quality wins certainly helps the program from where they were a few weeks ago. But I don't think anyone was really thinking Final Four a few weeks ago the way they were playing when they started off this new year. So that's big words, but it definitely makes sense when you stack wins versus Kansas, even with a struggling Kansas, a little less they normally are, and then Texas Tech, and doing it without being at your best. Although, as we said in the open of the show, you can't rely on winning when you're not at your best and impressing with victories when you're not at your best too often. Certainly not once you get into March and into late March. And then if you're still playing beyond that, you're going to need to be at your best more often. McBride does need to be more consistent. Certainly Culver needs to be on the court more often. And Sherman needs to potentially get on the court more often and be healthier. Granted, I don't think the Mountaineers were expecting as much as they got from him recently, so it's almost all gravy. What do you expect out of the game against Oklahoma, though? That's the one coming up. That is the one currently on the schedule, regardless of what's going on with Baylor. Oklahoma, the 12th ranked team in the country right now. The Mountaineers may jump and be a better ranked team than them, but certainly that's a very equal team. There's no days off in the Big 12 this year, and a lot of these teams are very, very easy. So in terms of not easy, but they are very even was the word I was looking for. What do you think of that matchup, though, with Oklahoma?
This is another very quality team. There aren't very many bad teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma's really good. They're 12-5. I don't know if they played tonight. But they're a really consistent team. Maybe one of the more consistent teams. They're not necessarily the best team, but I feel like they're one of the teams that has played to their talent level pretty consistently. Like if you look at their losses, they did have a loss at Xavier back in December. But if you look at their conference losses, like they lost to Tech twice, they lost to Baylor, they lost to Kansas, and they beat everybody else, right? They split with Kansas. They beat Texas. So like they've lost to really good teams,
right? And
they've beaten pretty much everybody else. And so I think that's a sign of a quality team. They did not play tonight. They're supposed to play Baylor tomorrow.
Yeah, Texas won tonight, though. So Texas is 13th ranked. So they did get a victory tonight. So they're in the middle.
And I think the fact that it's at home always helps, especially if, God, I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of road games. I don't know if what we saw tonight at Texas Tech has been the norm as far as fans. There were a lot of them there. They were very loud.
Yeah.
They were not social distancing. They were not wearing masks.
Definitely not.
We had an ACC game canceled the other day because there was a video of two players in a maskless situation at a party. Christ, both teams were in a maskless situation tonight in Lubbock.
Well, Alan, I didn't hear the Zoom, but I'd imagine Bob Huggins is either secretly or outwardly pretty upset about that because he has been vocally mad about this schedule, about West Virginia dealing with these games being moved. It's no fault of their own, but with going on with Baylor and then to see a team in the exact same state as Baylor just basically throwing caution to the wind, and you just lost games off your schedule. And he's already upset about the 9 p.m. tip. Huggins vocally is not a fan of the 9 p.m. tip because of what West Virginia is dealing with in conference. So I can't imagine that's making Huggins too happy seeing that, knowing the schedule that just got ruined for West Virginia in that state, in Texas.
I don't know what we're doing here. I mean, are we trying to play the game so everybody can make their TV money? Because that's what it seems like everybody else is doing. But apparently
Right.
That's not what the priority is everywhere. I thought it was disgusting tonight. I thought it was even worse that the ESPN broadcasters seemed to appreciate it instead of calling it the
They had a rough night
that it is, and calling it out as something that shouldn't be happening. I can't believe that occurred. I can't believe any of it occurred, to be honest. But so apparently, home court advantage is going to be a big thing in the Big 12 now, I guess.
Okay.
And so the fact that they have Oklahoma at home, to get back to your point, seems prescient in this one. I think West Virginia should be a handy 4 or 5 point favorite in that one.
Now, the Mountaineers are matriculating fans into the Coliseum. That'll be the word I'm going to use. They're matriculating fans in the Coliseum. They're doing it on a slow drip, a little bit more than in the past, so that may help them a little bit.
That was only 4,000 fans from what I've read is their policy, and it's like a 14,000 seat arena. It seems like you should be able to do that
right
with that number and have some semblance of social distancing enforced.
Yeah, and the commentary.
And I would imagine that West Virginia will do a much better job of that. By the way, they run a tight ship. They're not going to let that stuff sail in Morgantown, despite the reputation of the school in some circles. I can't imagine that being allowed to occur, no matter how many fans are in the Coliseum.
No, and this isn't even just about sports. West Virginia as a state has actually done a pretty solid job in dealing with the pandemic overall, which I don't know if anyone had that on their bingo chart prior to getting involved with COVID-19. So hats off. Yeah, that is the case. So if you're going to have a home court advantage, it's probably going to be as minuscule in the Big 12. But I will say, Mountaineer fans, even if there's less of them, that's motivation for you to really get going for those home games in the Big 12 when teams get there, like that matchup with Oklahoma. That's going to be a quality matchup, to say the very, very least. And the potential is there.
2,500 fans? Is that what I saw? Something like that?
I believe that's around. Yeah, they're it's definitely under 3, but yeah, they're allowing a little bit more. The last game had a little bit more. There's still the cardboard cutouts there. You're still seeing Meg Bolger's cardboard cutout there.
I like the Super Bowl mix of the live fans and the cutouts in between
that was
each
nice.
other. I thought that was good.
That's how you do it. That's social distance right there.
Because you can't. Yeah, and also
it doesn't hurt the viewer.
It looked full on the crowd shots. You couldn't really tell the difference between who was cardboard and who was real.
Oh yeah, I'm watching the Super Bowl. And my fiance is like, excuse me, is this a fact stadium here? No, there's some cardboard cutouts there that are fooling you. So yeah, that actually worked then, if that's what the kind of goal was in terms of the viewer. So that did work. I don't know what's going to happen with this schedule in the Baylor games. They were supposed to be back-to-back. They're not right now, but the statements are they're going to try to make those up. I don't know if that means making both up. I'd imagine that would be the only fair way to do it, but who knows when Baylor's going to play again based on what we've heard right now. But the Mountaineers
there is a whole week off at the end of the schedule, right? West Virginia's last current scheduled game
could do that. Yeah,
is the 27th against Kansas State. The Big 12 tournament not scheduled to open until the 10th. So I've been talking with Keith Dambrot at Duquesne about this too, about getting games in that week that aren't currently scheduled, because I don't think anyone wants to sit for a week going into the conference tournament either. That's
an idea, and I'm sure Huggins would love that, just because he was the one who called Gonzaga to play them when they didn't have to earlier in the year. But I don't know if you really want to love back-to-back against Baylor and lose both going into the tournament. But what's the difference? I mean, that's the schedule. That's the situation that it's been for the Mountaineers this year. They had 2 weeks off. And at the very least, that 2 week off period allowed them to get off of the national conversation with Oscar leaving. That they swept that under the radar, and now they're playing basketball again. So it, in a way, was a positive as well. Anything you need to see as we round things out here? Anything you need? Alan Saunders, Mike Asti here, WVU Hoops edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on PSL. Make sure bottom of the video, hit that subscribe button. Help us get our content to you, and also head over to WV Sports right now for our postgame coverage.
Yeah, Cody's already got the game story up, and
I saw that. Yeah, and
the video of Chris Beard's epic meltdown ejection fist
Okay,
bump sequence, which is pretty good.
That's there as well. I haven't seen that, so I'm excited
that's
for that
that's
one.
a
I want to see the
one.
full highlight rather than when I was setting up this game. I kind of missed a little bit of that. But anything you need to see here from West Virginia moving forward, or any critiques of the Mountaineers? They're certain they got a big win, another big win for WVU. But Huggins is never satisfied, and this team did not again play at their best despite getting the win. So eventually, the chicken you'd figure is going to come to roost here if they keep this up. But anything that you need to see more from WVU, or that you like from WVU here moving forward into the down stretch of a schedule that is still kind of a gauntlet road getting towards the tournament, with their destiny in front of them and the potential, as you said earlier, for a very special season?
I'd like to see I'd like to see them put this game away a little bit earlier, honestly. I felt like Culver's fouls really kept them from doing that, but
yeah, that's been a thing.
They kind of had this game on the ropes a little ways, and then before Beard's meltdown, it's kind of a close game right at the end. I don't know. I have a hard time nitpicking. I don't have a lot. If this is the way they're going to play every night in and night out, they're going to win a lot of games, almost all of them. Look, I've seen a few games this year that haven't been that consistent, but I watched the last two, and they've been really good. And I don't. There's not a lot I can take from especially either of these last two games really that I can say is a significant, downside. They've played different kinds of games in this stretch here too. That first Texas Tech game was a totally different style of game than this one, and they win them both. I really like the way they're playing right now. I think there's some questions about the kind of stylistic matchups they can deal with, and where they can deal with really good opposing players, but those are the kind of questions that you're not going to find the answers to until you get either deep into the Big 12 tournament, or I guess maybe if they play those Baylor games, we'll learn a little bit more. The Bears, certainly one of the best teams on offense and defense in the country, have the ability to expose some weaknesses with a player like Jared Butler, one of the best players in the country. But until we see something like that, I've got nothing.
And I'm sure, knowing Huggins, that he wants to play those Baylor games and really test his team, because when you know that you're going to the tournament, you want to make sure your team is at their best. And if they need to have some humble pie provided to them, I'm sure he wouldn't mind having that sliced off to them either. So I'm sure he wants to get those games in. The Mountaineers get a big victory. It's an impressive victory. They weren't at their best, but they certainly show what their potential can be, and the destiny is certainly in front of them. We'll see. That's kind of been the adage for the Mountaineers this year, is we'll see, because it easily could turn around and be the exact opposite the next game. We've also seen that this year as well. There are things they need to be better at, but if they give this effort, they're certainly going to be good enough most nights. He was Alan Saunders. I'm Mike Asti. The Mountaineers get an 82-71 victory over Texas Tech. They're now 14-5 on the year, and I'd imagine getting right back into that top 10. Granted, how long they're there is another question, because they have another hard matchup with number 12 Oklahoma coming up, and then a difficult game against Texas if they have a break in between, or if they ever play those Baylor games. And we know all about the Baylor Bears. The Mountaineers now 14-5. Texas Tech, not the same, as they've now continued to struggle and potentially now moving outside the top 10. Find us at WV Sports Now. Find us on Twitter at WV Sports Now, as well as at PGH Sports Live. Hit the subscribe button as well to get all of these post-game shows, as well as all of our content on PSL, and get notifications when we go live or release anything. And the Mountaineers' next game is on Saturday. It is against number 12 Oklahoma. For Alan Saunders, for all of us throughout the Pittsburgh Sports Now family and Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm Mike Asti, once again impressed by the Mountaineers, but we'll see if they can keep this up down the stretch.